And this is my friend.
Okay, over to you, Erin Sullivan.
Okay, I was thinking about before we started to do, before everything went funny with the video. I was thinking about how I think that there's a level of almost complacency and boredom that's come up with the COVID, because we're sort of used to having flu bouts and things like that, but we're not really that aware that it is actually a global phenomenon. And I don't myself get any news from, say, Afghanistan or anywhere, in the other kind of part of the world. I only hear about what's going on here, on our continent. And I don't hear much about, other parts of the world. And I'm kind of curious if anybody has noticed that it has kind of shut down a certain level of awareness or communication, in a big sense of the word. And we're all communicating, yes, but I mean real global awareness. Because if we get sloppy, and what the epidemiologists are saying, and one of whom is a very close friend of mine, Dr. Larry Brilliant, is that September is going to be another flare-up. And so that means that nobody should start getting too excited and too loose. Yeah. So I think that rather than being afraid, we just go with it. We cope. That's what it's called, coping. I mean, people coped with, the last major plague, was the Black Death, and that was in the 1300s. And there's a list of unfortunately, in Tarnus's book, Cosmos and Psyche, he didn't have the hindsight or foresight to actually go back further than 1940, because I was born with Mars and Saturn and Pluto conjunct in 1947. And so there was one in 47 and one in 55. And so it's not just about Mars or it's not just about Saturn and Pluto. It's about, people having to learn how to cope with a situation that is completely and utterly out of control at this stage, and are, doing their very best with their masks and making really interesting and creative masks and being observant. I haven't noticed a single person that has not been, really observant of these rules that we're going through. And so I wondered if anybody had thought about this, and why we're not hearing about, unless you know about what's going on in say, these, really poor, very broken countries with this pandemic. I mean, Italy had a huge number of deaths, and yet it's very small and civilized. And yet the northern part had none. So it was the bottom half of Italy. So it doesn't seem to have any rhyme or reason. And that's where I think we have the problem, is in that there's no real grip on what it is that's going on, what's going to happen, how long it's going to be. Even the epidemiologists are very hesitant to get too excited. They're working night and day. It's like, this is what they do. I mean, scientists get terribly excited about stuff like this because it means that they have to get to work, and they sleep on couches for a couple of hours, and they're really at it. And so it makes me wonder, does anybody interact with people in other parts of the world that can maybe tell me some about what's going on? Or are we all just sort of North Americans who are relatively privileged and who don't have COVID. And is anybody close to anyone who has been touched by it? No?
How about Ari? Would you like to begin your talk?
Sure.
Great.
Well, I'm not close to anyone. I know people who know people.
Yes.
And I'm not very close to anyone that has even had it.
Right.
But, a part of what I'm observing is there is that reality of, okay, this might come back. There might be another wave. And the thing that I'm actually called to really speak to bring out is,
yes,
in light of these transits with Mars and Aries squaring all of the Capricorn, one of the archetypes that's at play is fear. And in the human psyche, fear and anger, absolutely. I mean, really any kind of visceral reaction. When you work with Aries squaring Capricorn, it's the anger, the fear, the Aries, but then the Capricorn is there can be a sense of futility.
Oh yeah, you're
depression.
right.
I can't control this. I'm being weighed down.
Yeah.
Factors are completely outside of my control. And it really, it points not just to the fact of COVID, but how the government, Capricorn, is dealing with it. The policies, the ways we're structuring and being responsible or not responsible, how we're relating it. It's like there can be, in general, with Capricorn, a very heavy sense of feeling limited and restricted because of factors within time and space and form that we've absolutely no control over. And so the psychology of fear here can be very strong. And the fear here is potent because Mars needs to feel free. Right? Wherever we have Mars moving, we need to feel free and activated, like we can make choices and walk our path. And when there are obstacles that arise, whether it's interpersonal or just things happening in life, the Mars function is sort of to cultivate a pause. Okay, how can I continue on? Because we have to be able to continue on. We have to be able to live. We have to be able to enact, make choices, and engage life. Because if we're not doing that, we're not going to do the work that we came here to do. Mars requires action and thus a feeling that we are able to act. So we pause and we reflect, what can I do now? What's the invitation? What's the possibility? And so the one point that I want to reflect on is really just bringing awareness to what fear does to our system. And I think this is fear met with grief.
Oh, that's
because Capricorn carries so much heaviness, so much grief.
I'm really glad that you used that word.
Yeah.
The word that's in my mind is the grief.
And there's no, I find, there's no integrating any strong block or emotion or challenge in our life without facing the fear and the grief that's present first. There's a teaching in A Course in Miracles that I really resonate with, which is there are really only two possible emotions when you get down to it. Love and fear.
Oh, yes, right.
And then love is really like what's true.
Fear is getting mad. You get mad and angry. Yeah, you're right. I think that's true. I remember that one. I forgot about that.
And fear, it's described as really, it implies love. Like where fear is present and when grief is present, it's all of it is really, even when anger is present, it's all an expression of fear in some way, and it's pointing to the reality of love. And that fear, it's, and what's that guy's name? He does a lot of grief work, grief ceremony work. And he says that praise and grief, love and grief are really connected. Because you grieve when you feel the loss of something that you love. And so, all grief and also all fear, because, to fear something is basically to be in denial of the thing that is actually true. It's to actually feel and experience in the present moment that which is forgiving and loving and safe is not available. And that's why we're afraid. We see a reality of hostility or something to be scared of. And that brings terror to the system. But the teaching that every grief, every anger, every fear, if we experience it, if we listen to it, which is itself hard, because the tendency is really to operate in it, to make choices in it, to work through it. And the invitation to really meet it, let it express, let it be seen, it allows our system to sort of drop down a little more fully, slow down a little more deeply, and to connect with, oh, underneath all of this is immense love. And what is it in this case? I feel with this Mars Capricorn energy, all moving into Aquarius Taurus, all this fixed energy coming up, it's really saying like, oh, I have a purpose in life. We have a purpose. Life is meaningful. Life is valuable. There's constructive work to do. There's healing potential. There's so much more to experience and do and put together and heal. And we can feel the collective grief. It's not just about COVID, and it's not just about the things that we can't have and experience because of COVID. It's not just about the memories that we can't pursue and continue the old way of life because of COVID, or it's even underneath that and more deeply than that. It's the potential that we have that is deeply unactualized, that is deeply unrealized. And, you know, a Capricorn issue is we settle for the status quo because it's conditioning. What does it look like to be a human being? What does it look like to be in relationship? What does it look like to, you know, have a family? What does it look like to be a operating human being, citizen in this world and doing a good thing and having the job and the 2.5 children and the car? There are all these status quo notions. And where do you get your food from? How do you live? How do you survive? What is the way that we're participating in humanity? And there's a grief because we've all pretty much agreed upon something that is deeply repressive of the deeper love and potential and truth that is of essence to who we are. And all these planets moving, Mars and Uranus eventually into Taurus, and Saturn, Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter into Aquarius. It's like we're sensing the upcoming big paradigm shift that is really just beginning to take hold, that we have to live in a way where we're just dropping all of the effort to make it, to survive in a world that isn't operating well. It's not functioning well. We're not doing this very well. And to actually allow ourselves to be inspired by a vision, by a way of being. Michelle, my partner, offered this beautiful word. It's like survivalism versus thrivalism, a way that we're thriving, you know. So there are no answers here, but just to really anchor in that perspective, the fear and yes, the anger and the grief. And if the waves continue, and if the world continues to actually reflect lots of really old ways of thinking and unuseful ways of responding to crisis as it arises, which it will, because we know, then there will be more and more opportunities to meet the anger, the grief, the disappointment, the hurt. And I really feel there's immense healing and importance in us getting curious about that, getting curious about our fear. You know, and whether it's a fear of getting COVID or a fear of, you know, someone that you love getting COVID, this doesn't mean ignore the fear, to violate what you feel is responsible, to ignore that. But what does it look like to kind of accept what is now, but to live without fear? And to really feel like I am actually constructively on path towards my purpose, my function, and that we collectively are on path towards our function. You know, one last point, something that I'm really learning a lot about is when we see another, or when we see the world as sick and diseased,
Yes.
it's actually a self-perception being projected out. And we cannot authentically and honestly see the outer reality as sick and then go and help it get better. Because we really have to acknowledge that our perceptions are not as objective as they seem to be. It's what we choose to see. When we recognize what's inherently true, and we see the wellness that is at the essence of life, at the essence of all of us, what is natural, then our orientation is to be nurturing that. Our orientation is to be honoring that which is well, that which is holy, that which is functioning, that which is thriving, that which is together, that which is healthy and aligned. And that really does point back to, can we look at ourselves and give attention to our own alignment, to our own wellness, to our own worth, our own deserving? You know, Saturn also has so much to do with shame. Do we deserve to live a good life? Are we worth it? Is it okay? And the paradigm is shifting. It really does call upon us to condition and be curious about our perceptions and how we're looking at ourselves, how we're looking at the world right now.
That's the whole thing. That's the whole issue, really. Aria, you brought up some points that are really, really interesting to me, and one of them is, of course, this idea of shame. You know, and the feeling of disappointment and betrayal, as if somehow our prolificity of the world and our trashing of the planet has had nothing to do with the kind of situation that has arisen now in the form of this plague. Now the plague, as I said, I don't know what's going on in Africa or Burma or any of those places. But I just don't know. But I don't watch the news. I don't have, I have just Netflix and Prime on my TV. So I only watch movies and stuff like that. So I don't really know what's going on. And we're being isolated, not just by the COVID, but also by the circumstances. And also, I really suspect the government as well. And I'm not being paranoid or an anti-American Canadian at all. But I do think that there's a lot being covered up that we don't know about. And that in itself is something that's very alarming and very concerning to me, is that what we need is, of course, more and more discussion about what this is going to bring to the collective consciousness, because it's the collective unconscious that has the reaction, and it's the collective consciousness that has the response. And so, I can tell myself, I mean, for example, when I'm on, okay, I'm really on. But when I'm at home, I'm on my own, I just love. So I'm an introvert, extrovert, absolutely perfect match. And I think that if you, do have introspection, which of course is a form of, really trying to explore what, and see, to see what you're actually feeling and where it's coming from. I think that that's what we haven't been doing, not in our generation necessarily, but certainly it has, we're a far cry from the sort of the 60s, where everything was actually pretty good. I mean, the United States was the best country in the world, I mean, et cetera, and it has since fallen short of the mark. And along with it, the leadership has defaulted on any responsibility for the problems that we have. The people who are homeless. We have basically, essentially, as a collective, not individually as ourselves, but we've trashed the planet. And it feels to me like an avenging mother. That it's like, okay, then I'm just going to smother you. If you just don't shut up and leave, then I'll just close your mouth for you. Mm. And so we've been shut down, essentially, by planet Earth. Even though this is not an airborne disease, it is still potentially present as airborne if you cough or you any kind of. My daughter is a dental hygienist, for example. She's working 4 days a week. Every time she finishes with a patient, which is one of the filthiest jobs you can do, is cleaning people's teeth. And most dangerous because of the spray, is they have to go into a private room, change all their clothes, put on three coats, as well as 2 masks, and she's only got 1 on. And so it's been very hard, but she went down to 4 days a week. But, the amount of protection that doctors and, healers and helpers have to undergo during this without knowing anything about when it's going to end, what it's going to happen. I mean, I've talked to my doctor. He's, has said, yeah, we could have a resurgence in September, but we also may be looking at a vaccine. And so, we just don't know. We just know that we're in the middle of a plague, and the plague is definitely part of what we're worrying about today and talking about today.
Yeah.
Okay, let's hear next from Louise, Edington.
Hi, Erin. Hi, everybody. Well, being the good little Saturn in Capricorn in the first house, girl that I am, I have...
There now.
Sorry?
It's in the first house where I'm living right now, Saturn in Capricorn.
It's in my first house in my chart. I kind of went down the list that Linda gave us and did some thoughts about that altogether. Yeah. But to go to your question, Erin, I had looked a little bit about what was going on globally with the pandemic, and it does seem to have spared Africa quite a lot up till now. The hot spots have been North America, yes. Parts of South America, some of Europe and India. That's the worst case, worst places hit. So apart from India, it seems like a very Western disease so far. And I think that's
it does, and I think that this relates back to the 30s, when there was a global depression. Okay, and that was a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, by the way.
Yeah.
And in 1931. And that was, of course, people heating themselves out of windows because they'd lost $1 million and various other things. But it did affect the entire, the self-value and self-worth of the world.
Yeah.
And so this is where I wish that we could get a real picture of the entire globe and how many countries are as infested as ours is, North America.
Yeah.
And what is going on with that? Why are we not getting any information? That makes me nervous.
I think it's out there. You just have to look for it. I guess people are in fear, as Ari talked about. So people are only concerned with really what's happening in their own little world and their own families. So
well, that's good. They should, because if we can take care of one person, we've taken care of hundreds.
Yeah.
Like our families and ourselves and stuff like that. Yeah.
But I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit to the stuff I'd kind of put some notes down on about what's happening to people's psyches because of the lack of contact and the depression and things. And I did actually just come across an article that said that depression has greatly increased. There is little difference in the increased rate of depression between countries with no lockdown and countries with lockdown. For example, Sweden and complete lockdowns like Spain. It's increased in both places exponentially, which I found really interesting. I found that introverts are coping with it a lot better than extroverts. Would you agree? So,
my introversion part definitely agrees. I'm fine. I'm fine with it. One wants company. You want to be able to choose that you can have company. You don't want to be forced into isolation. And so I think what you're talking about is this business of factors is that we have to isolate.
I'm finding that a lot of people have found new ways of connecting with people. Well, we know that Zoom's gone off the off the chart, and online therapies have,
Yes.
they've increased. I put all this down to the North Node in Gemini to go to the astrology. What community has changed. When we had Venus retrograde in Gemini, everybody was kind of letting go of extraneous friendships, I found, and really
19 years of this.
sorry.
The nodes.
Well, this is just our lesson now, right? This time, isn't it?
God, please.
Well, is there anything wrong with getting rid of extraneous friendships? This mass need to be connected with everybody. I think people have found out who their real community is, what their real core values are in friendships and relationships. I think that's really been a big impact of COVID and of the astrology, which of course it's all tied together anyway, because COVID is the astrology. There's an immense amount of grief. I've been looking at Ceres, the dwarf planet Ceres, and her role in all of this, because of course she was conjunct Saturn Pluto on January the 12th as well. She was at 22 degrees. And since she went retrograde on July the 7th, I've noticed in Pisces, I've noticed people starting to go through the grieving process for what was, and learning that we have to learn to live with this to a degree. And with Ceres being about the harvest and the natural cycles of the earth, I'm noticing in my community, my friends and everything, people are realizing that we perhaps need to start growing our food again. We need to come into smaller communities and help each other locally, because the government, as you said, has been probably hiding things from us or not giving us the full picture. And we're learning to look after each other more. I've really been noticing that a lot. I don't know, maybe I've got more connections in out here in where I live. But I've noticed a lot of younger people as well. They're suffering a lot from it, because it feels like their start in life has been really snatched from them.
Yeah.
The depressions and the anxiety are really out through the roof for them.
Yeah.
Conspiracy theories are through the roof with all this as well. And that comes from the fear, I think, as well.
Oh, yes. Well, I can't imagine a conspiracy that would set up something this profound. I mean, that even the straightest doctor in the world would never deny that this is very real.
Well, there are a lot of people that think it's a hoax. So, and that's been growing.
That's an escape. That's okay. They can think that if they like.
Yeah. But I'm just talking about what I'm seeing and about how people are experiencing it in their psyche, which was one of the questions. And since Neptune went retrograde, that's gone through the roof in Pisces. Ceres going retrograde in Pisces. Kind of the fear and the delusions and the illusions and the making up fantasies and stories has gone through the roof. I'm noticing an awful lot of that as well since lately with COVID, since I thought we were kind of talking about where we are now. It's kind of the hysterics. So there's kind of all of those parts of it are growing, the sleeplessness, the anxiety. So thinking somebody's out to get us, thinking we're all going to be.
Do you feel any of these things yourself? Or are you noticing it? No, I mean,
I don't.
Because I'll be willing to self-confess to some anxiety, etc. But I mean, is this something you've noticed, like, prolifically around you?
I've noticed it prolifically online, yeah, because I spend a lot of time online.
Online. Oh, okay, yeah. No,
yeah,
I don't.
Yeah, you're not online as much. I have a big online community, and yeah, there's a huge growth in the wellness industry. The fear has ramped up to the point that it's all a big conspiracy theory and a hoax. the virus is real, but it's been put out into the community
I have
deliberately.
never heard that, ever.
Really? Oh, it's there, Erin, and it's kind of like a collective insanity almost, which is very
Well, I think it's a collective defense mechanism.
well,
mean,
that too.
One
Yeah,
way of coping, and one of them is denial.
yeah,
And so denial can be easily introjecting the fear of the external, of what's going on outside ourselves. And so we pull it in, and then we say, no, that can't be happening.
yeah,
It must be part of the conspiracy of
yeah,
whoever. And there's no one to blame in this case. We have nothing to blame except our own planetary treasure and how we haven't nurtured it and
yeah.
lived in the world as it wants to be lived in, with the animals and the peace and the people. Not that it's ever been perfect.
No.
However, the last 50 years, my generation,
Mm-hmm.
we have, for all of our hijinks in the 60s and so on, and the fun and the laughs and the highs and the so ons that we had, we were very conscious of the planet and its value and its worth.
But was everybody? I think that was your.
Well, no, because
yeah,
you see,
exactly.
we were actually arrested for thinking like that in those days. I mean,
So I think that comes back to the levels.
We were arrested in San Francisco one night. We were all of his friends in the jail. It was quite fun, actually, all together with the
back
band.
to the levels of consciousness, I think, as well, doesn't it? The herd.
It is about consciousness.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess people are reacting differently dependent on their level of consciousness in this pandemic as well. There's different states of consciousness and different states of fear and denial. And some people accept it and know we have to live differently, and they're probably coping better with it because they can take action to start to grow food, barter food, look after the community and the earth in a more healthy way. And the people that just want to go back to normal and to the mass consumption are struggling.
Normal.
Normal.
Wasn't,
I know.
okay, the next topic will be normal. We're going to talk about what's normal and what is not.
Yeah,
okay?
I know. Well, there is no normal, is there? No, but this is what they say. I can't wait.
The relative norm, I think, is what they call it. And the relative norm actually does believe in that COVID is actually happening. So, I mean, there are those who don't perhaps know, and I'm thinking, that's why I'm asking, does anybody have any contact with people in places like Afghanistan, in the mountains of India, at the Khyber Pass? I mean, what is going on? We're not getting any news on the world and the situation in the world, and that I would love to know. I think a global awareness is going to have to come from this in order for it to be washed away, for it to go.
Oh, I agree.
I mean, it's not just about positive thinking. I mean, I'm not being stupid.
No.
I am thinking that it does require consciousness.
Well, interestingly, I do have a friend in India who was telling me and it's terrible there.
It must be dreadful.
Yeah, and interestingly, they support our current president. So it kind of shows the same kind of attitudes, maybe.
Sorry.
The same kind of political landscape.
Well, you see, that's because they're in India and they're not here and they're not us. And so,
well, their prime minister's very like our president. So, yeah. So, but anyway, what I do also see happening is really well, I've mentioned it a little bit. Local communities coming back together, more emphasis on how we've been treating the earth, like in the 60s, but community gardens, they're big. There's whole groups of people coming together in many cities it's not like allotments now, it's just people growing it in their gardens, but they all come together and do it together and feed the community they live in, and they all do it nicely, socially distanced. It's just like a new way of living is developing out of this, which I think is going to be good in the long term, personally.
I think in the long term, you're right, that it's correct, that our consciousness definitely needed to have some sort of shock in order to wake up and begin to honor the planet that we live on, instead of trashing it. Granted, there's been evolutionary, I mean, once there were dinosaurs and then the next year there weren't. And one day there were five Neanderthals in the south of France, and the next year there were none. So, I mean, there are these phenomena that take place. And I think we're in the middle of one right now. I think we're in the middle of wiping out half the planet.
I think we are.
And
I don't think we're done, anywhere near done.
No, we're near done. And it's not going to be done until, until we dump a lot of people. And that's not, me being weird or paranoid. I really do believe that that's going to happen. And when it does, there will be less stress on the planet and its organism, and it as a living, breathing entity. And so that's why I believe that people are, do suffer depression, but they've been taught, because of all of the different pills that you can take now for depression and various other things. The whole point is that depression is a deep pressure on the soul. And so when people are depressed, a pill isn't the thing to take. A walk is the thing to take. A phone call to a friend.
Some people are actually beginning to realize that. We've got a long way to go.
Well, I think that consciousness has a whole lot to do with, us being able to survive this.
Yeah. I agree.
Because, a lot of people aren't going to survive it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Louise.
Thanks.
Let's hear now from Laurie and Lothian. Please unmute, Laurie.
Hey there. Hi, guys. So I created a little presentation that's like a story. It's story time, so you can settle in and listen and tuck yourself in for a bedtime night story all about the alchemical burn of Mars. And I practice a multitude of different astrology styles, and one of them is I'm a bit of a Babylonian astrologer. So in ancient Babylon, Mars was the god of plagues, okay, not Neptune. There was no Neptune. And this pandemic began in Wuhan, China, and it happened just after the heliacal rising of Mars in Libra in the middle of October 2019. And as Mars was rising, coming out from his underworld journey and coming up in the dawn hours again, he was conjunct this very, very difficult star around 9 degrees of Libra. And that star is Vinda Meatrix. And it is a star that's associated with a multitude of woes. One of them is depression. Another is witch hunts. Another is falsity and deception. And as well as Mars was rising, he was in exile, obviously, or in detriment. He was in Libra, which is his not home sign. And another way of seeing that in the ancient Hellenistic tradition is that he's exiled from his home and he's isolated from where he wants to be by being in Venus's home instead of his own. And so we begin to see that Mars, at this time of his heliacal rising, as Wuhan was brewing a pandemic in the background in October, November of 2019, that we were going to experience what I'm calling the alchemical burn of Mars. And that burn of Mars is because Mars is calcinating, just like in the stages of alchemy, the entire collective, burning us to ashes. And the burning is because Mars has not spent 6 months in Aries since 1988, July to January of 1989.
You say, I'm sorry to interrupt, but when you're talking about calcification, and today we have the exact within 50 minutes of Mars square Saturn from Aries to Capricorn. And so what you're talking about is completely relevant to what's going on right now.
And I'm going to be pointing to Mars with algal or Pan with Algo, the asteroid, and Mars with Pluto, because it also ties into the idea. See, my astrology that I practice is less psychological and more like a researcher of history, and to look at what cycles repeat in order to predict what cycles are coming. And so, like, for instance, the last time Mars was in Aries for 6 months, wildfires raged throughout the United States. There were more acres burned in recent memory. Like, at that point, it was millions and millions of hectares or acres of burnage by the end of that really hot, fiery Mars and Aries in 1988. As well, we had strange parallels. You can't make this up. That was the fall during Mars and Aries of Jimmy Swaggart and Jim Baker scandals, the religious preachers. And now we have the Jerry Falwell Jr. scandal. So, and I'm bringing this up as well as a drought in the US that had the government in 88, July to January of 89, really putting out a ton of assistance, almost like during COVID, to help the destitute farmers, because that drought was the biggest drought since the Dust Bowl in the Midwestern United States. Now, I'm talking about the United States because I live in Canada. I used to live in the United States, so it's where I'm most familiar. So I'm just going to talk a little bit, sometimes historically, contextually, about the North American continent. But when I come to the stars in a minute, I will also be talking about how the world is impacted, because the fixed stars are particularly relevant to what is happening with a sense of isolation, depression, and extreme, someone said collective insanity, maybe Louise. And I do believe that is all about Algol. Now, the star Algol sits at 26 degrees of Taurus and is Medusa's head that Perseus had in his hand, you know, the famous holding it up in the left hand of Perseus. And in that star system, this is the most malefic of all stars. It is the demon star, it's sometimes called Satan. It's the head of the Gorgon Medusa. And it's never usually a particularly positive star. It can sometimes bring fame, but with great consequences. So there's an asteroid, and its name is Pan. And of course, Pan has many different meanings, but it is pandemic, it's panic, it's pandemonium. And that asteroid Pan became conjunct on the fixed star Algol in May of 2019. That was when the CDC announced that there was a measles outbreak in the United States, the first in years. Pan returned on June 8th, 2020, retrograde over Algol. That was the beginning of the attempt in most countries, particularly the USA, to open up again after the lockdown. And the third pass will be in April of 21. Now, for reasons I can't go into now, it's way too long, I will predict that in July of 2021, for a multitude of fixed star alignments, we will see the clear end of this pandemic. But before then, we're still under the alchemical burn of Mars. And that heat and that fire, it is reducing to ashes. There are 7 stages of alchemy. He is reducing to ashes everything we believe to be true about who we are and what the world is about. And some of that includes the revealing of conspiracy theories that sometimes look crazy to a lot of us. I don't believe in them, but nonetheless are showing an underbelly of the collective shadow. Now, one of the things I wanted to bring up about the Mars story is that this Mars Pluto story is where I think that the pandemic is really showing its face more than the Mars Saturn. And the conjunctions, the 3 times that Mars will be square Pluto, which is rare, right? Mars squares Pluto every 2 years, but not 3 times. Those 3 times are going to be very significant, very important turning points around this pandemic, and our Vindamayatrix, depression, falsity, deception, witch hunts, insanity that goes with the star that the heliacal rising of Mars began to initiate in October of 2019. So what it is to me is August the 13th was the first Mars square Pluto exact. And that was the day the United States reported the most COVID cases since mid-May. And Biden and Kamala Harris came out and said, we all have to have a mask mandate. They're standing for policing or making it a non-negotiable in the collective. When Pluto returns with Mars to have that square, Mars returns to Pluto on the second pass, it's October the 9th, and it's retrograde. At the same time, Mars is also going to be retrograde. I'm going to be very curious to see October the 9th or so, what will play out in the collective, because to me, that Mars retrograde is still Mars's plague. It's Mars's story in play. What is he going to be doing when he goes retrograde while Pluto and Mars are square? It could be some kind of returning to, going back to some sense of earlier authority or control about a way of dealing with the virus. It's a midpoint of a story, because on December 20th, Mars will go direct, re-encounter that square with Pluto. I mean, he is direct, will re-encounter that square with Pluto. And I think the heat and the real intensity of the insanity of algal, where we are collectively losing our heads. We are losing our heads. Our families are breaking up over fights to do with QAnon, pandemic hoax theory. It's just a political ploy by the Democrats, etc. There's crazy, really unusual extremes going on thanks to the algal piece of the story. And so I think we're going to see that October 9th is a real turning point. And then we come into the more in the clear on December the 20th. There's something else I might mention just before we might have some questions perhaps. You know, Panacea is another asteroid I've been tracking during the pandemic. Panacea means the remedy that cures all things. And that particular asteroid will conjunct Spica, the most blessed and fortunate fixed star of the heavens, which involves protection, good luck, good fortune, and no harm done. And that Spica Panacea combination is pretty powerful. And we're going to see that Spica Panacea conjunction in April of 2021. And we'll see it again in July of 2021. But the good news is, as well, is the first of the three is December of 2020. So the Spica Panacea combination, and there are many other factors that I will not be able to go into to do with other asteroids and other delineators of pandemics, like the asteroid Cronus or the asteroid Apollo, god of plagues. But the Spica Panacea combination is particularly intriguing. And in the United States natal chart, using the Sibley chart, that Panacea Spica combination in December of 20, April of 21, and July of 21 is happening in the United States 11th house, which is a house of good spirit, which promises an extra special blessing from that conjunction of an asteroid with a fixed star. So I'm hopeful. And yes, I have known people, Erin, who had COVID and been quite ill, including myself and my family, but none of us were in peril of dying. Yet I do know people who have had family members pass who are elderly. So, but they were definitely high risk, you know, elderly people. So that's my take on it. I really think we're dealing with a Mars effect here more than anything else, rather than Neptune. But that's because I do adhere to the traditional planets more than I do the outer planets in my astrology practice.
Okay, thank you very much. That was really informative. I mean, there's a lot of material there that I never know, heard about, but didn't know it so cohesively. So I really appreciate what you were saying, especially about, you know, the whole Mars situation this year. You know, just to throw in one thing, that it struck me as odd that Esar was supposed to begin on the very day that Mars went retrograde. And I just thought, astrologers, I mean, I'm not in the board of directors anymore, that was years ago, but I'm still friends with everybody. But I thought, what on earth would you pick a Mars retrograde day to begin a major astrological conference? And that was when Mars was stationed retrograde. So, you know, when you talk about Mars, the Mars effect, it has really been very powerful. You know, and as we speak, you know, we've got it exactly right now at 26 Aries, squaring Saturn at 26 Capricorn, which again is conjunct Pluto, which is again conjunct Jupiter. And from where I live, I can look up every night and I see Saturn and Jupiter, but I know that Pluto is invisible and stuck right in between the two of them. And yeah, so I can see it.
Okay, wonderful. Let's hear next from Michael Bartlett. Please unmute Michael.
And I'd like to share my screen. So here.
Oh, Michael, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, I'm just mumbling, that's why.
Oh, okay. Oh, God, I get it. I understand. It's acceptable.
All right. Well, I'm
Wow.
really enjoying this topic because it's bringing up so much for so many people around the planet, and I just think with everything that's going on this year, you know, many of us as astrologers have been looking at forward. We knew something was coming on the horizon. We didn't really quite know what was coming, but we knew that there was a real significant change coming. I really feel that the really wonderful opportunities that is coming out of this is the pursuit of personal purpose. If there's one thing many people are coming to me for readings right now is you know, I think, you know, people are sort of like in a crucible. You know, I think of Saturn as being very crucible, like Saturn and Pluto.
Yes, it is.
Crucible that holds the plutonic radioactive energy and is able to maintain it in such a way as it's able to hold it. You know, I love Lori's talk because the alchemy is so powerful with these two. And as you know, Erin, you get to live with this energy all the time. So you're very gifted
I
in
was
that.
born with it.
Mars included. So I think, you know, with these really amazing things that are going on, you know, we can't look at these and not think of there being collective energy at work, but it's also, of course, having its ramifications in each of our individual lives. And I think, you know, Ari touched on it, Lori touched on it. I'm sorry, I'm really bad at names. Let's see, Carol, I think was the other. Spoke to it as, you know, that this is such a changing of the guard. It's such an opportunity for us to find new ways of having a relationship, new ways of seeing things. And of course, with the shifting of the nodes, I just think it gives us this really wonderful opportunity to seek something deeper. This idea is funny when someone was talking about being bored earlier, and a lot of people talk about being bored. I have not had really any time off since the pandemic began, between my work with the homeless shelter here in Santa Fe and astrological work and writing and readings and things. I just feel my life has been very full. And so I was very excited when I saw something, you know, actually I'll get back to it in a second, but I think, you know, the important things in times like this is that we really need to find ways to go within or go without. We are the microcosm that is part of the macrocosm. And without finding ways to go in and find these ways of relating interconnections within ourselves, I think the labyrinth is such a great opportunity of going within or going without.
I've been there. It's beautiful.
Yeah, wonderful. On Fridays, they don't know, you can't read about this anywhere, but Fridays is the one day they pull the chairs back and you can actually walk it. And I highly recommend it when travel restrictions start flowing again. But, you know, it's already said it, and it's really perfect. It's survive or thrive. I mean, I think, you know, throughout history, regardless of what's going on the planet, there are people who are going to be surviving and there are going to be people be thriving. The more opportunity that we have to take within and go within and take the opportunity to see what we're holding on to, what our grief situation is, what our fear situation is, how we're relating to people. Are we keeping a mask on ourselves so we can be in a relationship and keep people happy? I think while it's not fun what's going on in our country or in the planet right now, especially with our political party here and our presidency here in the United States, one thing that I think is really good about it is it's kind of forcing a dialogue. I saw something the other day on Facebook that kind of made me pause for a second and said that there are places, you know, that are refusing, feeding people who are, people who are Black, African American, or Mexican. And I was thinking, you know, oh my gosh, I remember like being a gay man in the 80s and not being, sometimes being kicked out of places or being.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's this interesting thing is like, how do we find this way? How do we find this way of connecting with one another? And so I think the only way that we can do this is like, we've been kind of sitting on a collective boil for a long time, this idea of, as long as all the little parts, as long as the African Americans act appropriately, and as long as the Mexican Americans act appropriately, as long as the whites act appropriately, then it's all good. But when everyone starts realizing that they have rights and that they deserve to be treated in the same way as every single other person, especially our elected officials, that's when we have to start paying attention to the fact, that it is important to bring everyone up to the table. It is important to see that that we're stronger by being connected with one another. And I think it really gives a rich soil for divine opportunities. It's a way of stretching out beyond ourselves that happens. You know, Black Lives Matter. I mean, I think it's not that these things haven't been happening before. It's just that, thank God for technology that people are filming them. I've been horrified seeing, you know, videos of people, you know, this police officer shooting this man in his back, and it, yeah, exactly, and then it's just it's with all that's going on right now, that this is still going on, shows that there's such a level of fear. And as long as we have a government, as long as we have ways that continue to propagate this idea of fear, where we're continuing to think that our brothers and our sisters or people are trying to come after us and do things to us, it's not going to change. And so, you know, it's about capturing these things on video. It's about showing that, you know, individuals are, you know, not doing anything and they're being killed. While I'm very sad by the fact that celebrities and sports figures are coming forward and sharing this, I'm so happy they're saying, you know, the truth is they're scared, and they should be scared. They're driving down the road just like anyone else, and they're being stopped simply for the color of their skin. And then it's just, you know, these are the things that have to change. These are things that are no longer acceptable. And, you know, and then we get into the thing, I think, you know, with women's rights. I mean, another aspect is, you know, how our president is showing, you know, how it's okay to treat women, and that there are people in his party who actually are agreeing with him, and that they're women. The disconnect beyond that is so profound. The inability to see one's grief, the inability to see the pain. You know, when we separate ourselves from one another, it's painful, but we have to do things from a defensive structure to make that okay. And, you know, all it does is build up more and more walls. It's not a surprise that, you know, that they want to build a wall, you know, across through Mexico to build it, you know, because that's what people are wanting to do around their communities. That's what people have done around their hearts. And the only way that's going to break through is through our honesty and through our sharing, that we all want to feel safe. We all deserve to be taken care of. We all deserve to be seen. I love this. This is a Brazilian artist, photographer, Angelica Das. She's documenting every skin tone on Earth to show, you know, this beautiful range. We're this beautiful, right? We're a human rainbow, and that anyone can believe that, you know, that a God is going to choose a certain race or a certain type or a certain anything of his or her children and choose it. Those are the ones that it accepts versus the others. Has never been part of what my belief structure has been, and I'm hoping that other people are seeing it. And I think the other thing that's really important, and what this points to overall, is that by accepting all the different aspects and the shades of our humanity is not any different than us also accepting the different aspects in our own birth chart. You know, what voices are you not allowing to speak at the table? What voice within you needs to speak? We need to open up a dialogue. We need to not be afraid to hear when other people are sharing what their experiences are. It's a really wonderful opportunity for us to see what's going on. And this is a kind of a final thing I'll leave everyone with, because I just think it's such an important thing. What we know is about 25%. What we don't know, like we know, you know, whether you know how to do open heart surgery or fly an airplane, you know, whether you know how to do that or not. And then the vast majority of life is what we don't know. And this is, you know, this territory we're in right now gives us an amazing luxury of being in the not knowing, and being in that not knowing is that place from which we can make choices that are new and fresh.
Thank you.
Treasure chest opportunity. So
Love this. Yes. Oh, and I also love your book, by the way.
okay.
Everybody should have Astrological Mavericks. I'm in it. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
You know, I'm just going to say a few words so everybody else can have more time. But suddenly I realized when you were talking, Michael, about being different. Now, my brother, it's a long story, I won't go into it, but he's gay, and he's 15 years younger than me, so he's somewhere in his.
He's around my age, I think.
Yeah, I'm 55 maybe.
Yeah. Yep.
He was born in early 60s, and I was 16 when he was born. Anyway, in the West End in Vancouver, British Columbia, because I'm Canadian too, and I was born in Vancouver. It's sort of a gay part of town. Everybody lives there. It's Davie Street. I mean, it's just a whole community. And my brother, is just because of what he's lived through and being beaten and, almost killed once and so on from being on the street when he was very young, and he went through just hell as a gay kid. And but now he's become this sort of hero in the sense that he's helped bring together hundreds of gay people, both men and women, because there's become a catalyst. A guy named Dory Love, which is an ironic name, in Vancouver is a sort of a haranguing preacher who harasses gay people, and he's just been arrested and put in jail.
Yay.
The cops said, no, you can't do this. So, there's something about the collectivity and and people getting together no matter what their inclination is or their love is or their feelings. But it's about coming together under, duress, or in the case of the COVID, which we're talking about, is that we're coming together sometimes on the phone, on Skype. I've talked to a couple of people. And other times I've just really enjoyed my time alone. I mean, I am an introvert, I'm an extrovert, I've just said that. But boy, when I really am enjoying part of this, and that's the time of contemplation, of depth feeling, really looking at how things are, what I'm like, what anger does. I have very, very little in the way of anger. And I have a Mars, Saturn, Pluto conjunction squared by the Sun and Mercury in the North Node, so I can be really pissed off. And people know that. Stop nodding, Michael. And so I don't mind sharing certain kinds of information with my friends who are all here today. But yes, I think what we're talking about is passion, which comes from the word passio, to suffer. And so the passion of Christ wasn't him getting it on with Mary Magdalene, it was him being crucified. Yeah? So when we think in terms of passion and suffering and what it really means and all the intensity that goes along with it, I think that, getting too excited or too involved with the whole COVID situation, aside from being sensibly aware and conscious and wearing your mask and so on, I mean, that's absolutely necessary. I mean, we have to obey the rules of the gods who have descended upon us to, permeate our being with this really, really dreadful disease. Because when it does strike somebody, if they don't get over it, it is not pleasant. And so I think that our discussion here has been really, really valuable. And I just wanted to bring up that idea that, opposition by one person against hundreds of people can actually create an entire coherence. And our coherence is now going to be based on the COVID. And so somebody needs to speak.
Yeah, well, like you think of George Floyd, I mean, I think, he's a perfect example of that. I mean, I think, we're seeing these individuals who are being able to act as a divining rod, so to speak, for, a whole collective of pain and suffering. And the truth is, I think everyone's full. And I think people are really done. People don't want to see the children being shot up anymore. People don't want to see any more people of color being shot up. People don't want to see women being raped and taken advantage of so that they can get acting.
Yeah, well, look what's going on in the government and the women that have been involved with all the government leaders and how they come out of the closet by the droves now. And, would have at one point been, well, obviously were deeply embarrassed, ashamed, and unclean. And now they've cleaned themselves by vomiting up this awful truth. And so I think that that's part of what the sickness is that we're going through psychologically and in our deeper self and a global perspective, is that the world is sick. It's throwing up all of its people, the ones who, you know, just happen to be there. It's usually, it's random. I can't think of a single individual who, you know, is going to die of this that deserved it. But, you know, we have to be aware that the COVID situation is a very, very deeply depressing situation. It's pushing.
You're naming all the Saturnian traits, and I think, you know, when that Saturn and Jupiter move into Aquarius and square that Uranus, I mean, I think it's going to be real interesting to see what actually gets disgorged.
I thanks for bringing that up. Just think about that. We'll talk about it at dinner.
We'll talk about it Monday, yeah.
No,
Louise is enjoying that. And sorry, Louise, I didn't mean to call you Carol. I'm bad when I learn people out in the beginning, so.
It's okay, no problem.
he's basically a nice guy.
Scorpio, you know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Let's hear next from Dawn Cerise. Go ahead, Dawn.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for putting everything together. It's beautiful. Okay, so just jumping in to share my screen. And to start from the beginning here. Okay, so basically update. In no way have I talked globally. I have brought examples from real life people, their charts and their experiences through this period. And so this is the COVID-19 update for EA Zoom meetings, and I am Dawn Cerise. And this is just a refresher for everyone, the chart of the Saturn-Pluto synod, which I believe was a pretty good spark for us here in the world to be expressing this kind of thing. I just brought over some of the definitions of Capricorn, where this synodic cycle renewed, and that would be responsibility, authority, discipline, social standing, status, maturity, time, boundaries, conformity, or lack thereof at times, judgment, restriction, politics, patriotism, nationalism, structure, ancestry, laws, isolation. I just picked a few that seem to be really popping up lately. Isolation, laws. Anyway, this is reiterated in the 10th house definitions with more of an outward social construct type focus. How are we expressing publicly? And Pluto here brings upheaval and overthrow, a total restructuring of the status quo, which I felt pertinent to what we're going through, because we really have restructured everything in our lives for what's going on, it seems. And then some of us haven't at all, those being essential workers, etc., still, you know, nose to the grindstone doing the work, while half the population has to sit home and isolate. It's very, putting out a lot of very interesting dynamics into the world, a lot of emotion, for sure. This young man I just recently met online and don't know him personally, but I saw that his chart was very intriguing for what was going on with the synodic cycle, and just wanted to, you know, get his take on what had gone on for him through this cycle. So internally, the internal chart is his natal, and the external is the Saturn-Pluto synod, and how that affects his chart, shown there. The real standouts are the moon of the synod chart opposite his Uranus in the 10th, conjunct his sun in Aquarius, and then the Saturn-Pluto on his Venus in the 9th house, right on the cusp of the 9th house. And then, of course, the Uranus of the chart conjunct his anti-vertex and Jupiter, and the ascendant of the chart as well. So to get his take on this, these are his words. He says, "Oh, I never get sick. So COVID-19 got to me in the first 2 months of it, and then I never got it again. Now he's young, 20 years old, as you can see by the chart. I mean, you know, his Pluto's in Sag. So you see he's young, you know. But he never got it again, and that would make sense for a young man. You know, he was able to power through it and not have any issue. But he says spiritually, it didn't do anything with me. And then he goes on and enlightens us. It drove my roommates and I to stay home. It caused a lot of temperaments. I had a mental breakdown because as an Aquarius, I had a Leo criticize my life, calling me autistic, bipolar, and saying I live spiritually wrong. It crushed me a bit. I went through some heavy meditation, channeling, and guided myself through tarot cards. And I asked them to lead me the way I need to go to get back on track in life. Within a couple of months, I left, lived with a childhood friend who, after a falling out, posted accusations, far-stretched lies to destroy my name. I now live in the middle of the desert, nature, making more money than I did in the city. I fell far off my social expectations, and I'm happy to be where I'm at. I feel like since I have a somewhat ruined image, I have been given the option to start again new without bending to anyone else. Very intriguing for a Uranus sun, right? In Aquarius, I like that. So it's a good lesson for him as in his youth, but without bending to anyone else. Even college is available here. I grew a lot, guided a lot, and went through my card of death, rebirth that I kept pulling. When I was younger, I understood spirituality and sadly even remember telling my intuition and myself that I'd rather live normally until it serves me no more. Wish I accepted being so isolated growing up because I felt called to intertwine with spirits then. I lost my sights and have been for a couple years now trying to grasp what I once had. And I think that really speaks to him, honoring his creative communication from the unconscious, having these shocking lessons come to him to kind of wake him up. I mean, he really went through kind of a very young dark night of the soul with these people attacking him this way, one right after the other. He had it kind of rough, but he's been able to stay home. He's obviously an essential worker because he's making money. And but he had been able to stay home and kind of nurture his private self through the pain of what he went through, and then moved back to his old stomping grounds, his place of birth, and really found himself again, which is kind of a success story out of the pain of all that. This is woman one, and she has here her natal chart to, again, the synodic cycle of Saturn and Pluto on the outside. And the green arrows are showing all the links, as they fall. It's in her 10th house on her Neptune, which is conjunct Uranus. And then she's a double Gemini. It's an interesting chart, isn't it, Erin?
It is an interesting one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going, oh God. Go ahead, you go ahead. It's a good one.
So she's got her, the synod chart has the North Node right on her Mercury, and that in the fourth, and that really speaks to the kind of things that she went through, as well as the synodic conjunction there, the conjunction being opposite her Venus. So it totally talks about what she went through. So Saturn on Pluto, on natal Uranus, Neptune 10th, with Venus in balance, Jupiter on the midheaven, part of fortune on Pluto in the 8th, North Node on Mercury in the 4th. The natal chart gives us the initial platform to understand her born dynamic and expression. When our subject moved to a new state in 2019, the home was a temporary location. She found a great job she loved, but moved again with her new fiance too far to continue with that job. Once settled into her next location, she was hired to work in a very specialized service firm, which would prize her intelligence and efficiency as well as her physical beauty. She's really, really a pretty girl. And so she was very valuable to them, it being a firm that had to do with expressing and creating more beauty in others. So she was very prized by them, and she was very valuable. So after only 2 weeks with the company, they went on lockdown, and the company said to her, hey, we're going to approve unemployment. We'd like to keep you on hold until this lockdown is over. And once it's over, come and still be with us. And she was happy to do it because she absolutely loved the place, felt like she'd found home again. And that was reflected, I think, with the Saturn Pluto on her Neptune, and then the Jupiter just into the 10th as well off of that. Pars Fortuna on the Pluto in the 8th really gave her a boost to to investigate deeply her necessary growth, which is what she also spent time doing. This balance from Saturn Pluto onto her Venus, and the node on her Mercury ruling her Sun Moon, really helped her figure some things out. And isolated, now this is her relocated chart, just to show you, this is her relocated chart in the area that she was at. So it changes her ascendant to 17 Aquarius, and there she is. She's brought her Sun, Moon, and Gemini into the 4th house out of the 3rd, right? So isolated, she found herself going stir crazy. Her natal Aries ascendant really demands a lot of physical activity. Very, very active young lady. Additionally, she found herself very lonely with her fiance, who is an essential employee, working all week halfway down the state from her and only home on some of the weekends. So while this is a very trying time for her emotionally, it also afforded much time for personal reflection on partnership and appreciation and the importance of making the most of the time that you have with those you love. She spent, her communication time was, being with anybody else was a very Uranian affair with that Aquarius ascendant, because she had to do so through Zoom, like all of us are, over the phone and through Zoom. Anyway, her this chart with its moon in a sextile to her natal Sun Moon, and even her relocated Sun Moon from the descendant, right? And the node on Mercury in Cancer right there. So like a duck out of water with her new Aquarius ascendant, she was unable to meet the world as she had been used to doing. Her accustomed way of behaving didn't seem to get her anywhere because it was all trapped in here. So she spent a lot of time communicating with others through the internet. And this new placement really allowed her to delve deeply and investigate more fully her early years, with that focus in the 4th house there as well. And her insecurities, her self-imposed limitations, with that Neptune having moved to the 12th cusp there, really allowed her to dig deep. And so she, after 4 months, they relocated again with her fiance, having dealt with considerable angst through trying to find a new suitable home half a state away during a pandemic when she couldn't see it. She came through with flying colors, really. Another hurdle met with success, bolstering her new greater maturity and confidence. This is a real success story as well, dealing with the challenges and coming through. And with man number 3, and this chart here is his natal chart, not relocated or anything, just the natal chart. And then the synodic Saturn-Pluto right here on the external there, attaching to Saturn and squaring his Sun-Moon conjunction in Libra in the 12th. Notice this is a huge stellium right here. His personal's very tight right there, from 21 to 24, almost 25 degrees. And then the Mars retrograde I've depicted right here because that's going to have major impact on his situation coming up. Now, I've been warning him for a lot of years, but you only can do what you can do, right? And then also notice that this Mars retrograde is actually working to go over and trine his midheaven. So we've got that squaring, the synodic cycle squaring his Saturn, opposing his Sun, Moon, Mercury, and Venus, squaring his Chiron, the synodic cycle opposite his Chiron, and then trine his midheaven. So born with Mars direct, it progressed retrograde when he was about 2. So he's totally familiar with that energy and probably, very happy that way. He recently passed his Saturn return, found it difficult and unable really, from an external view, to take the lessons to heart and to grow and mature from the challenge that it posed for him. The Saturn-Pluto synod square to his Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, stellium in his Libra 12th house, the center of his being. Really, he's a very, very much 12th house person, and Libra. From his second house of self-valuation, this coming from his second house, but on the third cusp with that Mercury right there, on his day-to-day activities and communications, it seems that these lessons are going to keep coming no matter how difficult it must be for him. He's going to keep going over it until it rams home, no matter how hard it has to be. So he currently, and this is the way he likes it, he has an easy job. It doesn't demand anything of him. He just, that's the way he likes it. He wants to do his time, go home, and do what he wants to do at home. Very private guy. Although he honestly neither needs nor really desires anything, the job that he has is not paying enough for his comfort right now. He's a little underpaid. And so he doesn't desire anything except to be left alone. So he's getting what he works for, really. But he might be growing out of some of that as he's matured. With Mars retrograde advancing, it will soon be in his 6th and 5th house. So we've got Mars almost here into his 6th already, I believe. Yes, just into his 6th, and about to turn around in the next couple of weeks here. It'll create a grand cross to his Saturn and Chiron while trying his midheaven. So it seems he'll have some very difficult lessons, perhaps painful, perhaps about him and his girl, perhaps regarding health. Easier said, the health of the relationship probably, but he's a smoker, so it could impact his health and his overall sense of self-worth being so key right here. I've been waiting for him to go over that for a long time, though. So through seeming an opportunity at work, he could be exposed in some way to the subversive actions of another. He could, just something that seems like yay at work could actually be causing some difficulties here, is what it looks like. And I don't know, maybe he's using chemicals at work that are not agreeing with him. It's hard to tell. He'd have to open up a little bit more, but he's so right in here. That Pluto on the ascendant, he keeps it very close.
So, hi, can I ask you a question? I'm just curious what, where COVID comes in here in his life. I haven't quite got that. So,
You're curious what? I'm sorry?
about how COVID-19 has come into his life and to affect
He's
him.
been an essential worker. And it's not about COVID, it's about the Saturn Pluto. So
okay. Sorry, I was expecting something about COVID.
yeah, I just brought a bunch of charts together for you that the Saturn Pluto synod was affecting. So I hope that's helpful. So then man number 4, and I could have gone into it more. His girlfriend is now working from home. It's causing a little tension in the relationship. There's your COVID for you, feeling that you need the link there. So, but it wasn't. It's not integral to the story for him. For this person, it is. I don't need to add the chart for the synod for man number 4. It's basically, this is his natal chart, and the synod of Saturn Pluto hits right here, and it's square to his nodal axis and to his sun, and the Mars retrograde goes over that as well. So the Saturn Pluto synod was in his 9th house on his midheaven. And when the lockdowns hit, our young man had recently decided to leave his management position with a poorly run company in the service industry. And he moved on to a group that he admired and was fairly new in this position. With an out of bounds Venus retrograde and as his Almutin, He is very handsome, meticulous, reliable, hardworking, creative, and detail-oriented. So they recognized him as an asset to the company. And much like woman number one, they have had him on unemployment, waiting for the lockdowns to lift and his industry to open again. Meanwhile, he was able to actually, part of this this cycle being right on his midheaven from the 9th, his grandmother was diagnosed terminal with cancer, and she decided at her age not to receive treatment. And he loves her dearly, dearly, very close relationship. But he was able to, with all this going on, visit her and spend a couple of weeks with her right before she passed, and actually help to take care of her and kind of, how can I say, give back in the relationship, the ancestry, go back and heal some of the family story and help her through her final days when perhaps he wasn't able to with his other grandmother, that kind of thing. And the Mars retrograde period promises a time to re-examine where he puts his effort, what he chooses to work on, and how he chooses to work. He'll be going back over the ways in which his physical activities are taking time from examining his inner health and his soul path, what he's doing. Because he's very active now, very, very physical and not all that spiritual, whereas when he was young, he had been. So that brings us to closing this up. The question that I was given is, how is COVID affecting you and other people? And so this is my chart. This is how COVID has affected me. I have been an essential worker, taking care of children, but from home. So I haven't gone anywhere, so everybody's safe. I've had a marked increase in my business, my personal business, separate from taking care of children, as well as personal inspiration to pursue and make concrete my fondest goals, my personal goals. I've been reaching out to share my knowledge with others and assist in their journeys. A lot of people are reaching out to me. And just as I believe it was Michael said, that a lot of people, a lot of clients are coming asking, what can I do with my future? What am I supposed to be doing? What's my path in this life? What am I meant for? I've had a lot of people coming to ask that, and been so blessed to just be able to help through seeing what I can see. And while taking care of children is beautiful, I'm actively attempting to heal the karmic trauma from my maternal ancestral lineage. Doing so has really crimped my finances considerably, but the added business that I'm getting is beginning to make up for that, which is very nice. I can tell you that taking care of and teaching youngsters is incredibly challenging at the age of 55. And well, we do it for a reason though, don't we? So that's my presentation, and I'm very happy to present a lot of positive things growing out of what this is doing for a lot of people that I know.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really great. So it's nice to know that he likes his job now.
So attempting to stop share here. Oh, there we go. Good.
There I am. Right.
Okay, shall we move on, or did you have something to say, Erin?
No, not really. I just, I guess what I'm most really interested in is, of course, the things that people have been touching on, excuse me, via people's charts and so on, is how deeply is their psyche in some way engaged in the fact that there is this pandemic. And so we don't always know you know, that whether we're engaged in something or not. But I think that people don't recognize the degree, unless they talk about it. You know, like when I go down to buy a bottle of wine at my friendly liquor store, there, you know, we talk about the situation. Like, how's your family? I mean, they're Mexican, probably have 25 people in their back room living. You know, so you know, I think it's really, really an important global world view that we have to take on at this stage, instead of really focusing so much on our own selves. I think we have to focus on ourselves as part of the world and try to heal ourselves to the degree that we can, that actually heals the world by that much. So, you know, me, you know, going through periods of feeling sorry for myself for maybe an hour or so because I'm not able to go here or there. You know, I just take that in stride. That's just part of what you do. The idea is to be able to live with this global condition, this pandemic, which literally comes from the Greek of, you know, demos is the people and pan is all throughout. So of course the pandemic is about being with other people, but not together, yeah? So somehow we have to find ways of doing that. Even if it means only having dinner and sitting 6 feet apart, it's fine. But we need to make contact with people. I think that's something that hasn't been brought up too much in the talk, but that's okay. I think it's important that we do make contact with other people, that we don't become withdrawn and really isolating and isolated. It's very important that we do force ourselves to go out at times. I go to this park down the road to lie down and, you know, just watch the sunset, or, you know, and watch other people playing tennis. I think it's really important in this time of isolation, forced isolation, to not be alone in it. Yeah? And I think that's part of what we're doing today. It's just trying simply not to be alone with the conditions under which we are finding ourselves.
Thanks, Erin. We have one last speaker, Victoria Cooper. She couldn't be present in person due to her time zone, but here's an audio of her talk. Now, if everyone could please remain muted while I play this.
Hello everybody, this is Victoria Cooper. I'm giving you this talk by recording called Lockdown, Breakdown, Letdown, Showdown. I'm using 3 charts. Number 1, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction occurring 12 January 2020, 1800 hours at Greenwich with Cerise. Number 2, Aries ingress 20 March 2020 at 3:50 hours, again Greenwich with Cerise. And the 3rd chart is the Great Mutation at 0 degrees Aquarius on 21 December 2020 at 18:22 hours, again at Greenwich. So the headline astrological event for this strange turn of current events was undoubtedly the 12th of January 2020 Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn for the first time in 500 years, in which chart we see not only Saturn, Pluto and Sun conjoined, but also Ceres at the same degree of 22 to 23 degrees Capricorn in quincunx to the Moon in Leo. Note that this chart for Greenwich shows a 23 degrees Aries MC, which was and is being highlighted by transiting Mars hitting this area as riots spread across the US and protests all across the globe, all of which is part of the promise of the conjunction. Preceding this event and colouring it in were 2 other charts happening right before the Saturn-Pluto-Sun Ceres event. Firstly, the lunar eclipse on 10 January at 20 degrees Cancer, directly opposing the conjuncting planets, and Uranus stationing direct on 11th of January at 6 degrees Taurus, giving the element of the unexpected to whatever transpires under the aegis of this conjunction occurring the following day. By 12 January, the moon's part in this conjunction was, as before mentioned, coming from Leo and in quincunx to Neptune in Pisces. So the Leo moon, the self, had a challenge stitched in to the following developments from two outer planets, Pluto and Neptune, as well as from Saturn, pouring cold water on the idea of emotional sovereignty, which was due to be jettisoned by the power-tripping Pluto and played with by Neptune. Pluto and Saturn are master manipulators, and as always, the most effective manipulation tools are twofold. Number one, guilt. Number two, fear. The media, represented by Neptune, employed both at full throttle, with lurid tales of death and half-baked information, and we all know, because whistleblowing doctors told us later on YouTube, that if someone died in a car crash, it was added to the COVID-19 death toll. Adding to the slow drip traumatization of repeat, saturation coverage on the news, we had Neil Ferguson's figures and assumptions, which led to lockdown across the world for fear of millions of impending deaths. And so in March came the lockdowns, with people sitting at home glued to TV and online content that inflated, Neptune, fear, sextile Saturn, and as it turned out, based upon false accounting of figures, adding to the low-level trauma spreading like fungus, attacking the proud Leo moon, the autonomous, playful and sovereign self. The fear related to food issues was also promised by the presence of Cerise in the conjunction, and thus it was. So looking now at the Aries ingress chart. So by the time we got to lockdown at end of March 2020, we had just had the Aries ingress. By this time, Jupiter had reached the arena of Saturn and Pluto, along with Mars. At Greenwich, we also had the ascendant at late Capricorn, joining the power base, and a more gentle moon conjunct Ceres, now in Aquarius. And here we also saw Saturn in square to Uranus. The latter theme is important because it clearly identifies the main feature of the lockdown. The notion, I want to get out, to get away. As the song goes, I want to break free. But no go. Moon was square to Venus from Aquarius and ruling the descendant, but nullified in its wishes to connect by the power brokers of Saturn and Pluto. Interestingly, the ascendant-descendant of the Aries ingress was also cardinal at 24 degrees, forming a square to the MCIC of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction earlier in the year. In the first house of this chart, we have a packed guest list. Pluto, Saturn, Moon, Ceres, Mercury, Point of Fortune, Neptune. Notable is the sign of the self, Aries, intercepted. Another layer of nullification of the sovereign individual as power structures took hold of every aspect of life. Where you could go, what you could do, who you could see, what you could buy, and how you could buy, and the rest. The self is being tutored into acquiescing all sovereignty. This underlies a whole lot of the anxiety people are feeling. Neighbours wailing in the garden whilst flailing their arms about, writing bizarre messages on Facebook. Children developing stammers when there had been no problem prior. A lot of my clients have described weight gain despite lower food intake, as cortisol levels rose with every empty shelf. Events struck at the very core of what it means to be secure. Everything that promoted life was being taken away, emptied, drained, crushed, with people still believing that everything is being done for your own good and the greater good. The inner conflict has produced untold stress, but the conscious mind hasn't yet cottoned on for most. The conscious mind is dealing with masks, queues, logistics, supermarket layouts, asking for types of flour, eggs, etc. The unconscious mind is asking, where is this heading? And the answer is provided thus: yay, we'll get a vaccine. You can trust us. In passing, in Wuhan in December 2019, the entire population received a mandatory vaccine right before the outbreak. It doesn't take a genius to work out where the spread came from once you realize this fact. At time of writing, we are facing end of furlough season, eviction season, unemployment season. At that point, the population will feel very let down that all the parties to whom they looked up to save them have not done so. Things will at that point crystallize. 2 and 2 will be added. Searching questions will arise in the mind of Joe Bloggs. Trust will have gone. Vaccine or no vaccine. And then now we're looking at the Great Mutation chart of the 21st of December. So if this is then followed by a further lockdown, Joe Bloggs, his family, colleagues, fellow citizens are likely to resonate strongly with the arrival of Jupiter and Saturn to conjoin in Aquarius and provide backlash. The get me out of here story will no longer be about 4 walls, but about a trap. Notice in this chart the presence of Mars at 23 degrees Aries again. So this is the same degree also that Uranus occupied at the historic Brexit vote. And Mars will be in square to Pluto. So that isn't a comfy ride. And notable is the presence of this 23 degrees or 24 degrees cardinal. And I think this is a key feature in all the events of this year. So Mars squaring Pluto is going to kick all of that promise right off. So the moon is taking comfort from the bold stance as displayed by her sextile from Pisces to Jupiter-Saturn. And the notion of the self wanting to be sovereign again is identified by the Leo ascendant in this chart. Another key point is that the nodes changed signs during lockdown in May 2020. This was the undersung point at which for many the worm turned. Instead of a pliant Cancerian vibe enabling the power play from Capricorn, we now had Mercury asking questions and Jupiter looking for answers, for freedom, for travel, for the future, for expansion as opposed to Capricornian contraction. As Jupiter forms this conjunction, expect the nodal thrust to support all things Jupiterian and to echo the Leonine assertion of sovereignty of the self from the opposing part of the polarity from Aquarius, endowing the collective with the quest to regain what was taken. That's all, folks. My love to you all, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the talk. Bye-bye for now.
Okay, Erin, any comments?
Yeah, I'm just sort of fascinated by all these conjunctions. I mean, I haven't actually run up horoscopes for a lot of these times, and when I'm looking at them, these charts, pretty much for the first time, even though I know what's going on and everything, I keep myself up to date. I'm amazed at the number of planets that are conspiring together, breathing together, and are really working at their, I think, their hardest, if they were conscious of being really archetypally conscious of themselves and where they're at, where the planets are at. But it looked to me like what people were saying, it's actually very difficult. I think it's difficult to come to terms with. I think that's part of what's going on, is that it's a very difficult situation that we don't know what to do and how to come to terms with it. And you can use astrology, only so far. when it comes to actually being able to comfort yourself. There's so much to be looked at and so many ways of interpreting it that it's really difficult for us as astrologers to, try not to find the way we can express the global depression, pandemic, what's going on right now. And the fact that it may be quite a long period of time before we're going to come to any conclusions. And I think that the astrological observations that have been made have been really great. It's just that I find myself almost overwhelmed by the, this sort of plethora of conjunctions, of squares, of Mars going back and forth all year. Because it was in November when I was looking at my ephemeris, and I thought, holy blank, something really big is going to come down, and but I don't know what it is. And so, that's, in a sense, that is, until I'm actually dealing with a real situation, that's the kind of astrologer I am. Is that I can't look at something and imagine, what it's going to mean or what it's going to say. I can only do, the astrology in relationship with the individual, with the event, with the situation, the circumstances, and so forth. And so I think that everybody's pretty much trying to do that. And because it's been a very touchy kind of afternoon. For some of us, it's been early morning. For others, somebody else who wasn't present, God knows where they were, was sort of curious. But I think that we've all had a very difficult time actually coming to terms with how to express this in ways which, help us feel any sense of relief. Yeah, that's one thing that's completely lacking, is that there is no real sense, that our analyses are going to bring us any relief. It helps us to understand. Okay, that's what astrology is about, is it helps us understand. It doesn't necessarily give us the answer and tell us when is it going to be over. I mean, I have had people ask me, Erin, when is it going to be over? I say, I don't know. Maybe tonight. It would be nice if it was over tonight. It would be great, to make a news announcement. Everybody can go out now and hang out, go swimming at the pool. But nobody can go swimming anymore because, we can't go near water. So, I mean, it's a very touchy subject what we were doing this afternoon. I think very difficult. Well, my afternoon. And so I think everybody did a really good job of expressing their way of viewing astrology and the circumstances under which we're viewing it. So I'm happy. I'm fine. I think that there was a very good job done by everyone. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Erin. Do we have any questions from our audience or comments? Please unmute and go ahead. What about any final thoughts from our speakers?
Michael, I'm curious. Unmute yourself. I'm curious about how you feel that, because you work with people who are homeless, and like you're very much and deeply involved and have been for ages, not just in bookkeeping, but also, really being in close touch with people who are in a terrible situation. Excuse me, please. And so I was wondering what if you got something to add to this?
Well, it's been kind of interesting because, the government's throwing a lot of money through the CARES Act at helping to do things and make a difference. But the interesting thing, what our experience has been, is that a lot of homeless individuals are realizing the lack of safety about being cared for in mass shelter, and therefore have decided it's easier for them to be out in nature, which is fine as this, spring, summer, and fall. But as we get into winter, of course, in places like where we are, we're at 7,000 to 12,000 feet, you know, it's not very safe in the wintertime. So it's gonna be interesting to see what happens.
No, I mean, in the summer it's 90 degrees and that's not safe. And in the wintertime,
if you're up higher in the elevations, you can at least kind of handle it. But yeah, I think it's gonna be very interesting. I think I think our ideas around homelessness are really going to shift, because with all of the stays of eviction that have now been removed, there are a lot of people who are being kicked out. I don't know what's going to happen. The ripple effect that's going to happen in the housing market. The landlords need, I don't know, it's hard when it's your income, but you know, also if you don't have anyone else to come in here, and then we're building a homeless, you know, great. I think this issue is just going to continue to snowball, and it's kind of funny with what's going on with, you know, this president saying, oh, you know, well, you know, these are the things that can happen under the, you know, Biden, you know, Kamala, you know, presidency and vice presidency. But the truth is, these are the things that are happening now under this presidency. And the hard part is getting any of these individuals to pay attention to it. You know, kind of like what I alluded to. I mean, people are so caught up in their, you know, it's so Saturnian, right? It's so fear-based. It's such an alignment of what old ideas that are no longer serving or stuck, because, you know, we want to have this idea that we're better than people, because then that makes us somehow feel better. Well, you know, that's got to be let go.
Well, it's not, it just isn't true. I mean, that's why I wanted you to have the last word here, was because you have actual hands-on, you know, work with homeless people. And, you know, you work in many areas of you know, of helping out other people. But, you know, I mean, I do weird things, like I buy those tiny little bags of popcorn and stuff, and I keep them in my car, so that when I pull up at a stop, and there's a guy standing there with his dog, they've always got a dog. How they feed the dog is beyond me. And I always give them a bag of popcorn. And
I mean, what I would like to say is, some people who are panhandling on the street are panhandling for other reasons, that it's really actually better to give to some organizations that are actually taking care of doing things. We can't give enough money away to veterans, and whenever I see someone on the street purporting to be a veteran, it makes my heart break, because people who are
really
well treated are giving money, like you are giving things. I mean, I think if it's food, it's great, but if you try and give food to someone and they throw it, you know that they're not there because they're hurting. They're there because they're panhandling. So that's really a great way to start it.
Well, actually, I think that's something that we have to watch for is you know, being foolhardy and other people making up, you know, their sob stories and so on. And I mean, that is part of what happens when there is a global crisis, is that it brings out the best and it brings out the worst in people.
And as long as there are people not getting enough, I mean, if everyone had enough, maybe there wouldn't be a need for scamming so much, you know?
Well, exactly. And I mean, that's where something really, really big has to take place in much higher levels than our astrology talks. I mean, we see it. They do it. Yeah. So.
Louise, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I just agree with you, but that, you know, regarding who's in charge and things, astrologically, I think we just have to go through the process, no matter who's in charge. The system's collapsing, no matter who.
Well, I think, Louise, what's happening is that we're really getting to the place where we have to start to really pay attention to what's going on within ourselves.
And in our local community.
Without it being, you know, not being self-centered, you know, it's all about me. No, that's not what I mean. I mean, we really have to start to watch our knee-jerk reactions to situations. Yeah. I'm very careful now, you know, because I'm very expressive and so on. But I'm very careful now not to say hurtful things, which isn't typical of me anyway, but still to be very conscious, you know, with my daughters who are like, you know, 50 and 53, and my grandchildren who are in their 20s. I'm very careful about what I talk about and what I say and how I approach people, because that's all we have is each other. You know, that really is the only thing we've got in the long run is our love for people and ourselves and our friends and our family. So I think it's really important to go inward whilst at the same time bringing things outward that are really positive to other people.
But on another note, I kind of have this feeling looking ahead that we're not going to be completely free of this till perhaps the end of 2024.
Well, we don't know that.
Well, you ask though, people ask. So that's yeah. And I think it's the Ceres Venus-Pluto conjunction at 0 Aquarius, December the 7th, 2024. I kind of think that's bringing a lot of the cycles together. So,
well, that actually marks the end of the world. In that case, what you're saying.
Maybe.
Yes.
Or the end of the world as we know it.
No, I'm sorry, but what you're saying is actually the end of the world. And that's not possible. That's not happening. It's not the end of the world. It's not the end of civilization.
I didn't say
it's
that.
The beginning of a new form of civilization.
Yeah, I said the end of the world as we know it.
Destruction of the old methodologies and the things that don't work and that hurt people and don't help at all. That's what's going to go.
Yeah, that's
it's
what
not
I mean.
going to last. This pandemic isn't going to last for another 4 years. The scientists aren't going to let that happen. Scientists are scientists. They're weirdos. They're nuts. They're crazy. They do this weird work and they make it happen.
I guess we'll see. Or we'll have another one.
See. You know, it's sort of like the old, they say in the 1300s when the Black Death was occurring and there were all these black pustules all over people. And then Monty Python, the British humorists, come out and they do this thing where saying, bring out your dead, bring out your dead. I mean, we have to find some sense of enjoyment and pleasure and humor as well. I would be very cautious about predicting that it goes on for another 4 years.
Maybe not at the level that we've got it, but I think it's going to be around.
Be careful about that because that's pretty scary for people.
Well, I think with jobs as astrologers is not just to pretend what we don't see.
I know, I've been one for 50 years. And I don't pretend anything ever.
Yeah.
I just try to be gentle.
Yeah, well, I don't mean at this level, but I think like the flu, it's going to keep popping up here and there. I think we're going through the amazing transition so that.
Michael, do you think it's going to go on for another 5 years, 4 years?
4. Yeah.
I mean, it's a virus that has probably been around for a while already, and so I mean, I think it's I don't think it's going to go away
any too soon.
Yeah, anytime soon. So I mean, I'm always impressed with people who are able to come up with dates and see things, and I think there's definitely going to be something to it at whatever dates they're seeing because otherwise why would you be seeing that? So I mean, it might be flare-ups. I mean, there's different mutations. There's so many different ways to go.
Thank you. No, I'm glad that you put that in because I didn't want to sound like a real crab, but the thing is that I find making a prediction of that magnitude that we might be in COVID for like 4 more years is actually a pretty alarming sort of situation.
But in the sense, sorry.
We'll also learn to cope with it and live with it better. So I'm not saying we'll be in this situation for that long, because we will learn to manage it. There'll be better treatments. There'll be better.
Yeah, I think there will in fact be quite an important medical breakthrough. I mean, as I said, that's what scientists love. I mean, they love to hear. They said, "Oh my God, there's a COVID is happening. I've got a job. That's great. I've got something to do, a purpose in life." And so, I feel I actually can't predict when it'll be ending. I couldn't do that. Wouldn't know. Just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's the beauty of astrology is everyone has such a great, it's an amazing lens through which each of us gets to look, and some of us have the wonderful gift of prognostication, some of us have the gift of hindsight, and some of us have the gift of the psychological insights, and I think that's what's such a wonderful gift of having this panel and being able to share all of our wonderful viewpoints and
Absolutely.
I'd happily be wrong, Michael.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I hear you.
Well, it would be lovely if we were all wrong and it ended tomorrow. It'd be great.
Yeah.
But the fact is that I remember when it was back in I wondered what was going to happen. Okay, so I thought, okay, that's fine. The astrology tells me that something really major, and it's going to be global. It's going to affect everybody in the whole entire world. It's going to come down, and and on March the 8th, which was the actual formal announcement that the world was now in it. That day, Venus, which rules things like venereal, venomous, venal, all these, Venus was exactly conjunct Uranus, and the Sun was exactly conjunct Neptune, which has to do with creeping and crawling and an invisible sort of underlying watery things. So it's through spittle and eye drops and things like that we actually get it. And so, and sweat and, all of the watery things. So it's very watery. But that was on the 8th of March, and I couldn't believe it because that was the day when they finally came to terms with the fact that we're in trouble. And so when I looked at I couldn't get to see. Now that's where astrology is really fascinating because it really does. It speaks to the situation. So, one hopes that we don't have to grind through 4 more years of this.
Okay,
Well,
I think that brings us to the end of our whole discussion.
Well,
And
thank you, Linda, for everything. Thank you, all you guys.
Thank you, Erin. Lovely to be on with you. Thank you, Michael. Thank you. Who else has left? Ari. Thank you.
great, thank you very much, Erin, and all our speakers. Please join us again on December 14th for COVID update number 5. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that was pretty controversial. This is fun. Let's do it again. All right. Lots of love. Take care. Don't breathe on you.